Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to continue covering the games from the Silver Lake Open, the first out of the 3 tournaments that I played in the past 3 weeks. Okay, in round 5, after dreadful 4 rounds with 2 draws and 2 losses, I faced a very young opponent from Kazakhstan. His name is Nuralyev S. He's either 10 or 11, I'm not really sure. He was born in 2010. And already he is a candidate master, although I don't know how his rating is so low. I think you're supposed to be 2200 to be a FIDE candidate master. Maybe because he has a K40, as all kids do, he lost a bunch of points. Or maybe he was awarded the title in some other way. One of my friends told me that you can get titles for winning like kids championships, world or European or whatever. So maybe it's like that, I don't know. Anyway, he's a candidate master. And actually, when I was preparing for the game, I actually saw a video of him playing blindfold chess on television in Kazakhstan. So, I don't know, maybe he's famous there. Anyway, when I was preparing, I didn't really know what to do, what to play. He plays the Najdorf. I do several things against the Najdorf, or better to say against the D6 Sicilian. In this game, I decided to play something I rarely play, the Moscow variation. So we have e4, c5, knight f3, d6, and bishop b5 check. And against most Sicilian setups, I like the Moscow bind center with c4, e4. And with this move order, when you can actually trade off your bishop, it's not locked in on e2, which does create some other weaknesses, but compared to some other positions where you have opponent c4 and the bishop on e2, you don't have an inactive piece. My opponent played bishop to d7. I mean, that's the main move. I was prepared for all 3, but he played bishop to d7. He took with the queen, and now I played the Sokolsky variation of the Moscow, which is c4. That's not the main move. Castling is the main move and playing a normal, standard Sicilian setup. Okay, but c4. Here he played knight f6, knight c3, knight c6. This is all normal main line of the Sokolsky, cd, knight d, excuse me. And in this position he surprised me. I was completely unprepared for what he did. The main move here is g6, playing for a dragon setup, or you can play for a Scheveningen. Which, since this bishop has been traded off, it's... Okay, so there's no bishop here and no bishop here. I think it's a favorable hedgehog versus Moscow bind setup for white, because I don't have a bad bishop and you don't have pressure along this diagonal. Your queen is on d7, but black doesn't have to play a hedgehog, black can play other ways. Anyway, my opponent here played the 3rd most common move, which I don't think I even looked at before the game. I really did not expect this, and I looked at it maybe once or twice. In the past, he played queen to g4. And I have to say I was really upset to see this move, because it simplifies the position. Of course, after having had dreadful results so far in the tournament, I wanted to win. So trading queens off is not something I was anxious to do. And queen takes g4 has to be the main move. That's what I thought in my head, and I knew it was the main move. I was kind of looking at castling, and maybe he doesn't trade queens, but he probably trades queens. And I get an even more simplified position where he can just trade everything off, play rook c8, I play b3, he plays g6, I don't know, bishop b2, bishop to g7, I retrieve the rook. And I don't see why this should be better for white. I don't think it's better for white. Since this pawn is still on e7, I don't really have any weaknesses to target. Black doesn't even have to play for d5. This is just too simple for black to play. So I took the queen. He took my queen, and now I actually knew, or during the game, before taking on g4, I remembered that knight c6 is the best move. And after bc6, I think I'm supposed to play bishop f4, or I thought I was supposed to play bishop f4 to prevent knight e5, to sort of threaten h3. So for example, if rook b8 here, then h3, the knight cannot go to e5, the knight goes to f6. and then, for example, castles queenside. And this is sort of imbalanced. Again, I'm not too happy with this position. I think it's very easy for black to play. So again, I didn't want to go into something like that. So instead, I declined the piece trade, at least for one move. I played knight f3. And I thought of a plan which I thought would bring him into unknown territory. So I wanted to do that. I mean, the queens are off the board. There wasn't too much risk, or I thought that there isn't too much risk in the position at the time. So I decided to try and complicate and keep as many pieces on the board as possible. He played g6, which is sensible. I played h3. I want to get this knight away, and I sort of wanted him to get his knight into d3 to check my king. I'll show you what I'd intended. It actually happened that I thought it gave me a good position. So knight g5, knight takes, knight takes. Knight to d5, gaining a tempo. Rook to c8, b3. And now he plays bishop to g7, I play rook to b1. And I was looking at this position thinking, okay, he has to play e6 at some point. He cannot keep this knight on d5, that's just impossible. So after e6, I go to e3, and my knight is better than his knight. And if he wishes to do so, he could play knight d3, and I would be happy with that, which is exactly what happened. Knight d3 check. King e2 and knight takes c1. Knight f4 is not dangerous, I can just go to f3. Okay, so he took my bishop, developing my rook, and takes. And this position I saw before I played knight f3, or yeah, and I thought this was good. I mean, he has a weakness and I don't. d5 is defended more than enough. My king is more active than his king, for the moment at least. And if I can get in f4, f5, that's what I was thinking at the time, breaking open this position on the king side, maybe I can create more weaknesses. Also, if this pawn is ever traded off for the e pawn, I have a 3-2 pawn majority, supported by my two rooks. So I thought that this was good. And also his bishop doesn't have too many targets. Almost everything is on a light square except these three. That being said, maybe his bishop is better than my knight, but my knight is still pretty good on e3. That was my thinking, like a long-term strategic thing. Plays king e7, and I played rook d1 first, just to try and put pressure. Bishop e5, which was a weird move, doesn't really defend the d6 pawn because I have knight g4, and I want to play f4 anyway, so I thought this was just a waste of time. So bishop g7 and now f4. Okay, he plays rook c6, wants to double rooks. I go knight e3. Sometimes I want to play f5, but I definitely want to prevent d5 and keep my knight in the center. My knight is just not good on g4. Also, if I leave my knight on g4, let's say I play rook d3, then he plays h5, I go back, and then he plays h4. And now I'm in trouble. This is now quite strong for black because I don't really have a way to target this pawn. I mean, if I ever get my knight into f3, what's my knight doing on f3? Also, he can just defend, or he already is defending the pawn. And it's restricting two pawns, so I'm basically a pawn down on the king side for no reason. So I went knight e3, he went h5, and I went g3, which is, the idea is to prevent h4. Of course, if I'll just show you something stupid. If h4 and I go g3 now, he can take it. If I go g4, he can take it. You all know en passant. So I went g3 so that I can meet h4 with g4. He played rook h to c8. I decided to double to try and put pressure on the d6 pawn, and he went a6. And in this position, I mean, the most logical move is a4, which I just didn't want to play. I wanted to get something more complicated. And I saw a way to complicate the position, to keep something more, or more tension in the position. And I decided to just go rook bd1 and allow b5. Because after b5 and takes, I can recapture. I don't have to take, of course, allowing his rook into c2. Maybe I should have played a4. I mean, a4 is definitely a better move, and I thought it was at the time, but not by much, in my opinion. And also, if I play a4, then it should just be a draw. a4, b5, I have to... Oh, excuse me. Rook b8 first. Rook b8 first, rook bd1, b5, takes. Maybe takes with the c pawn even. Takes, takes, rook takes, maybe knight c4, d5, and I mean, this is just perfectly equal. I don't know who is better. Pawns are on the same side of the board, so in theory my knight is better than his bishop, but in practice with two rooks on the board, I don't think that's relevant. Should just be a draw unless one side blunders. So I didn't want to go into that. So I played rook b to d1, b5, I went king f3, and now the plan is slightly different. He's going to play d5 at some point, which I'd anticipated, which means that I will either be able to put pressure on e6, or I will be able to get my rooks to the e file and threaten f5. Now, of course, he should play f5 at some point, because if he doesn't, maybe I play f5, restricting him even further, in which case, if he takes twice, then d6 is isolated. But he doesn't have to play it straight away, because I'm not threatening f5 now. He did play it, though. And, of course, I have to take... I don't think keeping the file closed or getting my king to e4 is good, so it would just be a waste of tempo, so I took. And I don't think gf is a problem for me, because I can always play g4. So I took, he took. And I'd considered g4 straight away, just breaking open the pawns, but I cannot do it yet because my pawn is hanging. Or I would have to take with the king, which I don't really want to do. And also g4 is not going away, he's not threatening h4 yet. So I just got my rook to e1. Okay, king f7 played, which is good, getting away from the file, and I was threatening knight f5. I don't think there was a better way to deal with that. Yeah, king d7 doesn't make sense, so okay, king f7. I went rook e2. I didn't want to lose an exchange, so if I try to double this way, then of course bishop c3, rook e2, bc4, and now my only serious mistake of the game, which I was completely unaware of. This I found during analysis. I took with the knight, which is a bad move. I need to take with the pawn and keep preventing d5. For example, rook b8, I can just break with g4. For example, takes, takes, takes. Now knight takes, and if rook takes c4, then rook takes d6. I mean, it's equal, again, but it's not worse for white. Taking with the knight is worse for white, and here's why. So knight takes and d5. I don't really have any good options in this position. I think the best option is knight e5 check, trading off my knight for the bishop. Coming back to this position, I mean, yeah, I should have taken with the pawn. Okay, just let's go back here. Yeah, there was one interesting point after f5, pushing with e5, but I just couldn't make it work. I don't think it works. So if he takes, I can sort of chase his king away, but after he defends, okay, take here, takes, maybe put pressure on the pawn like this, threaten to double rook. So for example, if he defends, then this. I don't know. This is something like this I saw, but I just couldn't make it work. Let's just see. I actually did not check that with an engine afterwards. Let's just check. Okay, e5, slightly better for black. Okay, minus 0.5. So I guess that's okay. Take here first, take. Yeah, okay, it should be equal. So it was actually interesting, but I wouldn't have played it this way. I would have taken and played rook b7. Okay, but I took ef5, gf5, rook e1, king f7, rook e2, bc4, and knight c4, and d5. So I played knight e5 check. If I go knight e3, then rook c1 was what was worrying me. I probably have to play something like king g2 to defend my h3 pawn in advance and to defend my stuff in advance. If I go knight a5, then I think I lose my knight. rook c3, rook c3, rook c3 check, king g2, and maybe bishop d4 now. I mean, this is just too much. His pieces are too active. He's going to play e5. He's going to try and threat my knight. If I move my rook, he plays rook c2, takes the a2 pawn. This was just not an option. So knight e5 check takes, and I took with the rook. Rook c1 as expected, and rook e2 covering the second rank. Now, I don't think I should play g4 here anymore. I think I need to play h4, which is correct. Because I don't want to open up another front for his rooks. He's actually slightly better here. And Milan, after the game, when we looked at the game, he said, yeah, this is now unpleasant for white. And I agree. The engine says, let me see what the engine says. It says -1 for black, which is surprising because it didn't feel that bad. It felt unpleasant, but not that bad. In any case, I did not manage to complicate the position for my opponent. Quite the opposite, I managed to complicate it for myself. Okay, he offered the trade of rooks and I declined. Rook f1 check, king e3. Now I have to be slightly worried about some checkmates, but not really. Rook cc1, h4. So here's a checkmate. For example, king e7, king d4. If he plays rook e1 here and I don't do anything, then here. So this is what I have to be afraid of. So after king d4, he went king d6, and I went rook e3. I'm gonna try to double. I want to prevent e5. I also want to prevent this mating idea. Rook f to d1, again offering a rook trade, and now I accept it because I have no other option, and he took. If he doesn't take, I think he has winning chances. I mean, if he takes the c file, again I'm going to play rook c3. That much is clear, but yeah, maybe he doesn't have winning chances. I mean, if I were him, I would have kept the rooks on the board trying to win, but he exchanged, and now this is a dead draw. In fact, black is the only one who can lose if he plays e5. My opponent, of course, is a very good player, so he didn't. He went king c5, and we agreed to a draw a few moves later, a3, and now we just repeated the position. There is no way forward for either player. I can never get into e5 and take the pawn because he queens. He can never enter my position, so it's just a dead draw. But in this position, if he plays the tempting e5, the losing e5, then white is just winning. I was kind of hoping he would do it, because after e5, fe5, king e5, I just play b4 and win. So either I queen my b pawn or I win all of his pawns. For example, king to d6, a4, king to c6, and king to d4, and I don't know, he can probably resign. He can resign. So all in all, I mean, I'd experimented with an opening which I have no experience with. I should not have done that. I should have played something I knew. I didn't know queen g4 that well. I mean, I was really surprised, and that should not be happening in tournament games. I should experiment in training games. This was definitely a bad opening choice, but I'm sort of happy that I tried to complicate things, but I'm not happy that I failed. Anyway, he's a formidable opponent. He defeated a few 2100 players at the same tournament, and he won like 100 rating points, so he is definitely underrated. So I'm unhappy, but not too unhappy. Okay, thank you very much for watching, guys. I will see you tomorrow with another game, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.